Welcome everyone to our webinar about unpacking the SAQ changes together with the PCI Dream Team. Primarily on the webinar, we'll address the questions what changed in SAQ, why did the council make these changes, and spend most of our time on the so what to understand how the change impacts you or your customers. We will be taking questions along the way, so please let us know if you have any questions. Before jumping into it, not that they really need too much introduction, but maybe a quick round of intros with the PCI Dream Team. So I guess going by order of the icons on the screen here. Why don't we start with Jeff?
Hi, I'm Jeff Hall, PCI guru. I write the blog.
Lee?
Hey guys, Lee Quinton, senior security consultant with Trusted SEC.
Ben?
Hey, Ben Rothke, Senior Information Security Manager at Tapad, Division of Experian. Used to be a PCI guru, now just in the supporting role for internal things.
David?
My name is David Mundhenk. I've been working with payment card security stuff probably since before there was the PCI data security standard, and work as an independent consultant. And thank you to Human for inviting us.
Thank you. And Coop?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Mark Cooper. I'm a principal security consultant at Trusted SEC, and I've been doing PCI since day one, and been involved in IT technology and security since 1978.
Awesome. Thank you, Coop. And yeah, I'm Jeff Zittimer. I lead product management for client-side defense and the new e-commerce requirements, 643 and 1161. Let's jump into it. Just very quickly to level set. Probably most people on the call are aware, but just really in brief, this is out of the announcement of what changed. So, in short, 643 and 1161 and the 1231 that's there to support 1161 were removed from SAQ-A, but not from anywhere else in the standard. And this additional eligibility criteria that we'll dive into shortly was added. So as to clarify who can use SAQ-A, which has implications beyond just these two requirements, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So just very quickly, why the change? So this is again an excerpt from the announcement itself, primarily because there was feedback regarding the complexity. So with this, why don't we, I guess, start with a bit of a round, right? What does the forum think about why the changes were made? Why specifically to the SAQ-A? Why are these requirements hard? Are they hard?
I don't think they're hard, and I don't think the changes were made for what we would call common sense validity. That's a new term I just made up. The thing of it is, I worked for the PCI Council. I love all those folks, but unfortunately, they have to listen to a lot of different folks coming at them from a lot of different directions. That's why I think you see something like this within a 60-day, window, so to speak, of when this was going to become mandatory on April 1 for 643 and 1161. And so there was some panic somewhere. I would say most likely processors that handle iframe transactions, or other types of processors that handle what were SAQ-A eligible merchants, which may not now be SAQ-A eligible, which is kind of funny. And I know we'll go through that as we speak here, but I'm not sure. But I suggest to you all that the biggest mouths, generally it's my mouth, but I suggest to you all, I can't take credit for this one, but I suggest to you all that the biggest mouths from some of the processing companies that do iframe type transactional work or other types of work with these SAQ eligible merchants made a fuss. That's my take.
I would concur with that, Coop.
I think every other standard regulation, things have always gone up, should we say. Even HIPAA was somewhat dormant. Now there's new HIPAA requirements coming due in 6 months. So this might be the first time I could think where a standards and requirements have sort of gone down and been minimized as the threats are going up. So there's something counterintuitive about it. But as Coop said, there was a lot of complaining, and it's not the results we wanted to hear.
Thank you. So yeah, we have. I guess we've covered probably most of it. I think what is maybe I'm left wondering. I don't know if this is really a question or more just my own kind of comment that because we see so many breaches happening, also in cases with iframes or even redirects happening, that it's kind of effectively a decision to, depending on which way the eligibility criteria goes, maybe to just kind of say that kind of risk isn't a priority as much anymore. And I don't know if that's unusual for these requirements, or if in general there are a lot of these types of trade-offs also elsewhere in the standard.
Well, I kind of agree with the concept that this is a bit counterintuitive, essentially because that people are still entering PII, most specifically cardholder information, into this potential attack surface. So the risks continue to increase, but for them to make this change, I'm still trying to, come to grips with it. But the council is the council.
Yeah, I
mean, everyone who has to implement anything, is always going to complain in the same way, teenagers complain about, cleaning their room. But the reality is nothing in PCI is let's say leading edge. It's all basic security, and then it's just sort of incredulous why these would be removed. I mean, there's no pragmatic reason for it. As I said, as threats are increasing, risks are increasing. The sophistication of everything is increasing, and to take away requirements, as it is, counterintuitive, doesn't make sense. But that's sort of how lobbying works, and both in the government. If you have enough power and you bang on the table enough, someone's going to capitulate. But we would have hoped the council would have, stuck to their guns.
Yeah, I mean,
well, in addition to that, the PCI DSS is a set of requirements that represent a minimum acceptability to conduct payment card transactions. Merchants and service providers can always choose to essentially, go above and beyond the standard if they so wish. So, that's why this is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and the risks certainly haven't diminished. I mean, we were discussing a recent sales call with an SAQA eligible merchant who was recently breached, and skimming was taking place. So it's the risks are still there.
If anything, the risks are higher now than they ever were. If you go out onto the places where these, I call them ding-dongs, lurk, or these ne'er-do-wells. My clients have heard me say that for years. I call them ne'er-do-wells. And the places they lurk, there are constant tools about, hey, here's a good script grabber. Here's here's this, here's that. I mean, these tools are literally for the downloading. It's not like the old days when you had to have a dial-up modem and find out who actually had the stuff and go get it. It basically slaps you in the face now. And, these kids have no idea what they're doing, and they fire off something. The next thing you know, they're into Uncle Joe's jewelry store's website and grabbing credit card numbers and showing it to their friends. Like, look at this. Isn't this neat? And why did that happen? Because Uncle Joe doesn't have anything watching his payment page. Now I understand, in looking at the and I'm sure, and I know we have a slide on that with that new wording about SAC-A. If your whole site can show that it's not having trouble or that it's not susceptible to attack. That's a tough call the way they've listed it out. So do I do that every day? Do I do it once a month? Do I prove that quarterly? I'm a QSA. Do I just bless it? Do I do a George Carlin and say, your site is clear? I mean, the point I'm making is, we have no criteria now. And so that's the thing I'm the most concerned about. Also, when it concerns using the SAC-A as a guide for scoping a rock for a large level 1, let's say. It was fairly easy in the past because we knew that 643 and 1161 were going to be done. And most of my large level 1 clients that had SAC-A payment channels, well, they were ready. They knew they had to do this. So they've been working with companies like Human and other companies and getting ready for this because they knew. Now I have to sit there and look at that same client and say, are you indeed SAC-A eligible? Because SAC-A eligible means that you can prove to me that your whole site isn't susceptible. Not just talking about your little iframe. I have to look at everything. It's not clear.
Language matters, and they made a decision, and the eligibility criteria is in the black and white. So
that's
they
right.
say site. They don't say page. It says site.
It says site.
So hold on, yeah. So hold off on that maybe just for a little bit, and we'll get back to it. Certainly, I think I think it's in the end it gets to the probably the most important question that people are wondering. So why don't we move ahead to the so what section, and so just to help us set this up, right? So what changed, right? So if you're a non-SAQ merchant, then nothing changed, right? You knew you needed to do these by the deadline before, and you still need to do them. And then if you are a SAC-A merchant, then of course, now it's a question of, good news, everybody, we don't need to do this anymore. Bad news, everybody, wait a minute. Are we even eligible for SAC-A, or do we need to be doing something else? So maybe a couple questions to tee that one up. So who is a SAC-A merchant? And I think Coop, you started mentioning, I guess because of FAQ 1331, that you have large level 1 merchants that also reference the SAC-A. So if the team wants to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing that as QSAs. I say we the QSA community, we've been doing that for years based on that FAQ 1331, and it has made life much better because even though a QSA is charged to use independent judgment, there needs to be a little bit of guidance to that judgment, or we could get a little crazy. And so the bottom line is, when you go into a large level 1, typically you are going to look at the various payment channels they have and match those payment channels up with the SAC that would apply to those payment channels, and then use those SACs as guidance for what requirements you're going to hold them responsible for to validate their compliance. And it was quite simple before this. If they had, let's say, an e-commerce site and they were using an iframe and they were sending it to some processor, who shall remain nameless, we would look at it. And it was very easy to go through the check marks on SAC-A and say, yeah, this is definitely a SAC-A eligible payment channel. And then we would use the requirements in SAC-A to, scope out that portion of the rock. The problem is now that we have this eligibility criteria here that we have to confirm that the site is not susceptible to attacks. That's a tough call. It just sounds to me like they've widened the scope now because they're talking about the site and not the payment page. And my understanding was, look, we did the right thing with requirement 643. That put things on the server side. So remember, requirement 6 is all about development. So 643 was, let's take care of the server side. Let's know what scripts we have on our web server. Let's know, what's going on. And then, of course, 11 is in testing your stuff, so to speak. Requirement 11 has always been about testing your stuff. So 11.6.1 was, okay, let's test our payment pages and let's make sure that the integrity is there. And so it was a great thing. Now it's gone. So in order to be eligible for that SAQ and be eligible for that payment channel, as a QSA, I have to do what's in front of us. I have to confirm that their site is not susceptible to attacks. I see a couple ways of maybe doing that. You could continue following, excuse me, what you were going to do for 643 and 11.6.1 anyway. You could continue that path, which I'm going to recommend to most of my clients. I think it makes the most sense because we can use the information that you've gained from meeting those requirements to confirm. We'll have to widen the scope a little bit about what the solution you're using is maybe looking at on the site versus the page. But the bottom line is we could do it that way. The only other way I can see it is if a service provider says, well, we can prove it. Well, then they're going to have to provide something to the merchants that shows that this site that the service provider is providing, let's say, this iframe and everything that it's using is not susceptible to attacks. And then the third way I think you could possibly do it, and we were talking about it offline before this webinar, perhaps you could have website penetration testing done. But then it comes down to the point, how often? And it doesn't talk about a TRA, but I'm thinking at that point, well, then I'm going to ask my client, well, how do you know that testing this weekly, monthly, annually, quarterly is good enough? Show me a risk assessment. So to me, this just adds work.
I think
that's how I see it.
I think from the service provider standpoint, though, I think it's a little bit easier because they are a service provider. So there is no 1331 that's applicable to them. They don't get to map across any controls. They're on the hook for everything that's applicable. So in my mind, service providers are on the hook for 643 and 11.6.1. So they have to be doing that anyway. And if they're doing that on behalf of their merchants, they're going to need to obviously implement whatever tool set they use, changes to CSP and SRI and things like that, if they're doing it themselves and rolling their own. That then enters the frame of reference then is, well, their compliance is validated with the AOCs that they provide to the merchants and the third-party service provider responsibilities piece. So in my mind, that could be a good way for us to look at it if we are looking at the merchant versus the service provider. As usual, they're shifting the risk. They're offloading the risk. But as we always say, you don't offload the liability, only the risk. So
that's right.
The more I've been thinking about this, the more I think that merchants that are trying to initiate the redirect in the iframe themselves are not going to be able to do that anymore. Because think about it, you have to prove 643 and 11.6.1 in order to be doing it. So the only way this really works is if you're truly totally outsourced to a PSP somewhere.
They're hosting it, they're managing it, and they're doing the payment processing.
Yep.
They're running the front and the back side of the iframe or the redirect.
Right.
I just don't. The more I've thought about this, and when I was editing the deck this morning, the more I thought about it, because we had a bullet point in there that said re-architect. And I started thinking about, okay, so how would I re-architect a website to get around this and still meet this eligibility requirement? There isn't any way. You have to be doing 643 and 11.6.1 in order to hit this if you're doing it from your own website. The only way this works is if you've totally outsourced to a Shopify or a BigCommerce or AWS or Amazon, or rather Amazon Commerce, because they're going to have to do it for you.
Yeah, and I think I'm sorry. I just wanted to say I think the hardest thing goes back to the merchant. One of my big pain points with PCI from day one, and I've been in it day one. My big pain point has been put everything on the merchant. And unfortunately, with this one, it angers me a bit because the merchants are all asking me point blank, what evidence, therefore, do I need to qualify for use of SAQ? And I'm like, today?
We'll let you know.
Well, you definitely have the CSP.
No, I understand all that. What I'm saying is, you can show me CSP, you can show me your the solution, whether you're using Human, Source Fence, JScrambler for root. Yes, I give equal time, even though the wonderful people at Human have hosted us here. All of these tools are great, and I know I listed 3 or 4. I'm not going to list them. My point is, show me that. Fine, I'm good with that. But CSP, guys, get real. CSP stuff's been around for 20 years, and nobody uses it right, and nobody has the IT team. These merchants are good at what they do. They make falafel tacos. They do a really good job at that. But unfortunately, making falafel tacos doesn't mean that they have a clue on managing their website. You know that these IT teams for most of these merchants that are dying for SAQ eligibility don't have people that are really going to be sharp enough to make me feel comfortable with CSP crap. That's why I didn't even bring it up as a 4th way. I'm sticking with my 3 ways that me as a QSA that I'll feel comfortable with. And I've been QSA in a few years. Show me that you're using one of these tools, and we can look that you've made it now site-wide, not just your payment pages. You're doing it site-wide. Show me that you're good. There's evidence, okay? The next one is show me something from the service provider, whoever it is that's running this whole site for you. And like you said, Jeff, they're running it, okay? So show me that, and then I'm fine with that.
Well, it'll be in their AOC.
That's right.
The QSA that they used.
That's right.
Said they're complying with 643 and 1161. And
that's right. And I'm going to leave it, and I'm not going to. We're like doctors, QSAs. I don't like to outjudge another QSA, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, we've always done that. And then the third way, as I said, you could do penetration testing on your website, but then you're going to have to show me a TRA. If you go that route, I want to know how often, why, show me the risk. And those are going to be kind of my 3. Now, that's Coop's dirty 3 that I would accept. As this is written today, that's what I would accept.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we may see an update to this blog post.
I pray.
That becomes
God, we can only hope.
I have prayed to the SAQ gods for the last week, and we hope so.
So if I can,
they have to. I mean, because there's just 99 questions for every one answer they have.
That's right.
so if I could, I guess, reiterate the 3 potential options. So it's do something like 643 and 1161, not just for the payment page, but site-wide. So actually even harder than actually just doing 643, 1161.
Yep.
And then the AOC from the service provider. So that's not the payment service provider that gives you the iframe. That's if you take the whole site onto the service provider, including the part that embeds the iframe. Okay.
Yeah, it pretty much has to. It's just what Jeff was saying. Pretty much, they have to be hosting the whole darn thing to be able to attest to you that they're doing it properly. Otherwise, I can't say their whole site is not susceptible.
I'm just waiting for the questions from SAQA eligible merchants that turn around and say, "Well, I want to do 643 and I want to do 1161. And I want to apply it to my payment page as it was originally intended. This doesn't make it easier for me. So why can't I do that? I'm SAQ, so I don't get to have a customized approach and add in those other 2 controls that are no longer eligible for me to cover it. The potential spaghetti junction that this forms of potential.
Well, and you bring up a good point, Lee. I mean, I'm in the middle of a rock at the moment where the client has 5 different payment channels for 5 different ways they accept cards through mobile and the various web channels they've got. All of them but one are SAQA. The one they have is an AEP. And my problem now is with the other SAQA channels is, did I gather enough evidence? Because they do comply with 643 and 1161. Do I have enough evidence that I can meet this requirement?
Yeah.
And that's what it really boils down to. I mean, the only way you can have 100% or close to 100% confidence in whether the controls are properly implemented, especially since most merchants get their iframe or their Ajax code from their processor. They deliver them a little snippet of code and they have to load it on their website. The only way that you're going to be able to validate whether the stuff is working or not is through empirical testing with stuff like a human security has. You have to actually do the testing and empirical validation.
That's correct. Absolutely. And then when you were talking about the other, those are kind of my others that I added in there. I would agree with moving to SAC AEP. I hate it because it puts so much more on the merchant, but I would agree with it. They're perfect.
Do you think that's
perfect.
part of the goal? If you don't mind me
I don't think it's a goal. No, interject. I don't think it's a goal at all. I don't know that it's the correct option either. I'm saying that if a merchant chooses to do that, if they say to me as their QSA, well, can we go to SAC AEP? And I'm going to be like, well, you can always do more than what's required. But I mean, no, that's not one of Coop's three still. So I'm kind of right in line with everything except for that first bullet. And then my other is that, you could do the web. The only other thing I would add in for the other is the web pen testing. Site pen testing, where you're slamming that site at some determined interval that you've done a TRA for.
Yeah, web application testing.
Web app pen test.
Web app pen test. Runtime testing. Script injection.
Exactly.
See what we can do. And this is the other thing about that criteria about scripts on the page. What scripts? First party, second party, third party, fourth party. Yeah, the scope has increased potentially just
tenfold.
So do you think it's completely increased, or is it a change between, okay, you had to do 643 1161, be prescriptive about it in this way, like collect the evidence to show that you're doing it, versus giving more freedom to say, okay, you don't have to follow these to the letter. You have to do kind of whatever you think is a way for you to demonstrate and confirm. So maybe take your favorite parts out of 643 and 1161, maybe bring a different capability or solution and sort of bundle that together in a compelling way. So it's like you lose the clarity, but maybe you gain some flexibility, or you think that's a complete non-starter?
I don't think it's a complete non-starter, but once again, I still think that every question we're going to get is going to somehow boil back down to, what evidence do I need? Yep. I want my SAC A eligibility. So what do I need? And that's where, as far as I'm concerned, all of the organizations that are out there that were already moving to some solution, they knew come April 1, they had to meet 643 and 1161. My advice to my clients who were at that stage has been continue with that process, continue to meet 643 and 1161. And by the by, maybe start expanding it a little bit to look at everything, including the payment pages. But we'll make an individual call, I would say case by case, because if it's a client that has just some cheesy website that just throws the iframe that the processor gives them, whatever, and that's being watched, okay, but it's gonna have to be a call, I think, between the merchant and the QSA as to what we consider the site. Site is a terrible word because it's not defined.
Keep in mind as well, we kind of danced around the fact that the client-side web browser session is what I like to refer to as the Mariana Trench of attack surfaces. Okay, and so you can do all the pen testing and source code reviews and all that kind of stuff, but until someone interacts, and it could be a cheesy browser, until someone interacts with that site, that's those sessions are actually dynamically served up these days. They're not static anymore. So you could hit a site 3 or 4 times in the same day and get different stuff served up to you, especially from third-party scripts and third, fourth, fifth party entities that you may not be aware of. And so that the only way you're going to be able to see what's going on with that is through your client-side web browser, empirical testing. And
I agree with that, but really 11.6.1 wasn't really doing that. 11.6.1 was making sure the page you're serving up was proper, and that was mandated as a weekly thing. And so maybe that's something that we say, okay, since they were going to make you do the 11.6.1 integrity checks weekly, maybe we could accept that you do your 643 and 11.6.1 stuff, but 643 stuff doesn't work that way. Like the tools that human have, it's near real time, and so the point is, we get right back to the same question, don't we? What evidence? And they really should come out and help us. I know the council has never wanted to tell a QSA what denotes evidence, but when they've muddied the water on something that was very clear, now it's time for you to tell me. And yes, I'm an old fart and I'm going to ask for it. I'm saying we need to know that we're not doing the wrong thing as QSAs if we tell them some of these so-called things to do.
The other thing I'd remind everyone, and it's not against human, but the council up until version 4, remember, a SEAM was not required. Now it is.
Pretty much, yep.
So remember, the council is telling people to do 643 and 11.6.1, but they're not mandating a third-party tool do it. They're wanting people to use tooling that already pre-exists that they can get their hands on at little to no cost. Now, I have large clients I know that are talking to human and the other players around because they want better tooling to deal with this. But your everyday Anna's Cookies that has a website in 2 locations in Walla Walla, Washington, they're going to use a CSP. I'm sorry.
I agree.
That's what they're going to do. And
I agree. Well, they don't talk to QSAs anyway. Most level 3, level 4 merchants don't come near a QSA.
Right.
And they're not going to come near it. This isn't going to change for them. Most of them are going to get sent to some cheesy portal by one of the QSA companies. I only say that because we don't have a portal. So it's feeble attempt at humor. But my point is, that's what happens with a lot of the 3s, the 4. They aim them at the portal. Right. Just answer these 5 questions. Pay us an exorbitant amount of money for an ASV scan that doesn't really scan you, and you're good. And the point is, unfortunately, as QSAs, we don't engage with level 3 and level 4 merchants, and we hope that they're able to get through this on their own, which is kind of really asking Colonel Sanders to babysit your chicken coop for an hour, and hopefully they're all alive when you come home. The bottom line is, I mean, you're not going to get down to the low level folks that were really what SAQ should have been aiming at in the first place. These big level 1s know better. Jeff, you can go on your rant now about the SAQ because it's a valid rant, and I like hearing it, because the bottom line is, this is one of these things that we've been giving these level 1 merchants for a long time, is this SAQ payment channel. And it's basically been an excuse to, go get an iframe provider and you're good. But I'll let Jeff Hall. He
I'm everybody's heard that rant. SAQ was the poorest mistake that was made when PCI rolled out in 2006. But I'm seeing that they want us to move on to these questions, some of which we've addressed and some of which we haven't. But
was one point I wanted to raise on the web app runtime assessments in lieu of this is there is 641 gives you the option of a web app runtime assessment being done in place of a WAF. That disappears on April 1st, and 642 kicks in, whereby you have to have an automated solution in front of the e-commerce platform, essentially. So maybe that does free up some customized version of a web app runtime assessment to focus in on what they're asking for on script as an option. But I think we'll see on the next assessor session. It's going to be dominated by this, isn't it? So
I hope so.
How much you want to bet they don't answer the questions?
Yeah.
I hope so. But then there have been times where we think that as QSAs, and they've had the assessor session and not talked about the elephant in the room. So I can only say I really hope that this gets talked about.
Yeah, I think this time is different because everyone is so. I mean, I think no one's happy about this, but.
Oh, I can remember a time when no one was happy about the old 6.6 with the web application firewalls. I'll tell you all about unhappy. I go way back on this one. I can tell you when everybody was mad that they used the word tripwire in the standard, so that everybody made tripwire rich. I can tell you all those old chestnuts, and so this isn't the first time where everyone, trust me, Ben, this is not the first time, and it's also not the first time that everyone was mad and we still didn't get good clearance. Until one of the brands. I mean, look at the EMV stuff. If it wasn't for Visa Europe coming out with their paper about e-commerce and EMV and all that stuff, we'd have had nothing. And that was even before the open scoping toolkit, which when Troy was at the council, he hated. And then they came out with their scoping stuff, but we had all already started to use the open scoping one. So this is just a history. And I'm not blaming anyone because there's plenty of blame to go around. Heck, you can probably blame me for some of it. The point I'm making is it behooves them. It behooves them to clarify this a little bit.
Well, and what it points out is that life abhors a vacuum. And when you leave a vacuum, you get a Gene Kim that goes out and does the open scoping toolkit because the SIG couldn't come to terms with what they wanted.
Indeed.
And so that's where that came from. I mean, this is another instance of that where there's going to be a vacuum, and this session, other sessions are going to fill that vacuum.
Absolutely. We're going to be putting out an excellent blog. I've been reading the previews of it before it gets final approval. My superior, Chris Camejo, superior in every way. He's a wonderful guy who is my boss. He's writing a blog on this that I feel is very good. And when it comes out, I think people will be able to read it and kind of understand, okay, so here's where we were, here's where we are, here's what we as a company, Trusted SEC. I used to work for TrustWave. Sometimes it's in my brain matter.
That's a Freudian there, Coop.
No, it's the RFK brainworm. I had two brainworms, but anyway, everything has trust in it. So Trust Coop, there, that's a new company. But anyway, it's going to be what Trusted SEC stands for in terms of how we're going to look at this as QSAs. And I think that's what's going to happen first. I'm sure that every QSA company is going to come out with what they think their approach is at this point. And we're going to find that all of them are probably fairly close. But like I've always said, if you ask a question and there's 10 QSAs in the room, you'll get 10 different answers. But hopefully on this one, we can kind of gel together, because I see some of the questions that are coming in are from folks I know very well that are all very deep in this business. And we all kind of get that we have to figure this out.
Yep.
So yeah,
the PCI change that launched like 1,000 articles and blog posts. So.
For sure. With that, so I feel we've been answering a lot of these questions, but probably it helps to, I guess, recognize some of them coming in and make sure we've done them fully. So we have from Simon Turner, I think he's most specifically asking about like, will QSA companies be giving feedback to the council, GEAR, the board of advisors, et cetera. I can say just from my part being involved in the task force that's been working for like 3 months to clarify the requirements themselves, we were surprised by this, and let's just say the communications channels have been very busy with a lot of feedback. But now, yeah, to the rest of you, I think we sort of answered that collectively. Yes, everybody will be providing feedback. I don't know if anyone has anything to add. Okay, we have from Jack Glasterman. I hope I correctly pronounced that, from Viking Cloud. Can there be some focus on the eligibility criteria? So I think we already covered the eligibility criteria, and yeah, what does it mean for evidence required? So I feel we covered that as best we could.
I think one of the things we haven't talked about that we should is maybe you ought to just stop running all this bullshit scripting nonsense through your website.
Well, good luck with
That's
that.
what got
Yeah, I was gonna
everything in
say,
trouble
yeah,
in the
Good
first
luck
place.
with
Yeah,
that.
he wants to go back to when we used to write our websites in Notepad and just put an A. He wants to put an href and an A line out and just
Yep.
send it somebody else. Send it somebody else. You know. Yeah.
No,
if only.
I mean, seriously, Google Analytics has been the worst thing since it was invented, and it's only gotten worse. David, I know, can attest to this. It's horrid.
Well, so what happens is, even with the best of intended organizations that have a very strong secure software development lifecycle policy and methodology, and they do their source code review, they shift left and do as much testing early as possible. And, they deploy a test website and they pen test it. And then their marketing people come to them and say, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, you have to include all these business intelligence, user telemetry measuring scripts in the site." And the folks in charge of that secure SDLC, they have no choice. They have to put that stuff in there.
Yep.
That's right. It's
And
always
that's
about
like-
the Benjamins, man.
Yeah, it's like business pressure.
That's right.
It's the end of day, it becomes it's just very, very difficult these days to run a business without all these. For a lot of these, it's very easy for many companies to tie directly to, we got this much revenue because of this tool, because it's helping us retarget ads, and then we see people who looked at something a couple days ago and disappeared, and now they're back and they bought it. So it's very difficult to remove it. And go back to the old simple days. What I will say, ideally, and maybe over time, companies do go there, is to create almost like an intermediate page, like the page that embeds the iframe, have that be a separate, completely fresh load from the previous page, and on that one, try to reduce the scripts as much as possible to what's absolutely business necessary or necessary technically to deliver the site. And try to remove everything else that's really important but not absolutely critical, to keep that on the main site and not on that intermediate page. Though if now we're sort of a question, would that even qualify for a SAQ anymore? Which is a bit of I think we had Stephen Best asking to try to confirm. So we're effectively saying that wouldn't qualify for a SAQ if that intermediary page wasn't completely outsourced.
The problem, Jeff, is that they used the term site. If they had used the payment page in that definition of criteria, we'd be having a different discussion. But they're saying it has to be site-wide. And, I've got clients that only have CSPs on their payment page. I've got to go back and tell them you've got to do CSPs across the board.
Yeah, I think that's I think site was a mistake. I honestly think it was an oversight.
Well, not only that, they completely overlook payment redirection pages, which can, are fair game as an attack surface just as much as the payment page. There's been plenty of instances where some site had bogus redirection code installed surreptitiously on their server, and they didn't realize for months that the stuff was getting redirected to a bogus site.
Well, it's like the proxy guys that'll tell you, "Oh, you shouldn't be using JavaScript. You should do just proxy." Jeff, tell them why JavaScript is much better and much more secure than the so-called proxy stuff. I know you can. No, you don't want to take that on.
Which Jeff?
Jeff's
Yeah.
a Toma human. He knows the answer for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah, our host. You know why that just doing a straight proxy instead of using JavaScript to move that away from their site. That's not gonna work at all. It's like the old days. Yeah, put in a Bastion host. You know.
Can you actually? I think people would rather hear why it wouldn't work from you versus from me. I have my other thoughts on the reverse proxy approach, but
well,
on the security
reverse
aspect.
proxy is different than just proxy, right? I mean, I personally, the problems with proxy is I'll put it to you this way: I used to do forensical type work way back, and everything that ever got nailed back in the day was all stuff that had been proxied, because it was too easy to come in and snank it. And, I just don't see it as a solution. I know that there are a lot of companies out there that push that as a solution, oh, don't use JavaScript, just proxy it over to us. We'll take care of it. And not so much.
Yeah. Beyond I think the security aspect and all the experience with breaches that have come with the help of a proxy, I think it's very telling that kind of the natural reverse proxies out there, like Akamai, Cloudflare, they didn't take this approach to secure JavaScripts. They kind of know better because they've tried that approach for, say, rewriting the HTML to improve web performance, and they found that they break stuff.
That's right.
Or rewriting the HTML sometimes even as bot defense, which is something that human security does very well. Also, like that approach of rewriting the HTML has a lot of issues. And so, yeah, it's just very telling that your Akamai's, Cloudflares, and others still went with a JavaScript-based approach and not this reverse proxy approach.
That's right. I just know that I saw so many naughty things that had happened through the use of proxy. So, I tend to feel that it's just not really the way to go.
Yeah, and I think sort of to tie off, we touched on this a couple times before, right? So there's the free version with CSP SRI, and then kind of stitch it together in some way to accomplish either the requirements or the eligibility criteria. And then there are vendors taking at least 3 or 4 different approaches with very different levels of like price points and technical capabilities and services on top, to where there's really kind of an option out there for every budget and approach. So that's as far as the ease or not ease. There's things that can be done, whether you decide to do the 643 and 1161 in some way, or if you decide to try and sort of prove that you're eligible. There's plenty there. So I think going back to the much earlier question, it's not necessarily hard, or as hard as maybe it would have been 3-4 years ago when the requirement just started. Going back to some of the questions. So I think, yeah, I'm sort of scanning, and I guess I'll skip some of the ones that they're already covered. So we talked, I think, about how frequently it needs to happen. We said like level 3 and 4s generally don't talk to QSAs. So I guess Simon Turner is asking, like, do we think that might change and they may engage QSAs more? Like,
yeah, no, not at all. No, not at all. Simon's a wonderful gentleman, and he's very well respected in this space. And Simon's making a great point. No, these 3 and 4, these level 3 and 4 merchants, they're not going to talk to QSAs. They don't even know what a QSA is, most of them. That's the kind of the sad part of it, and that's why, in my opinion, that's why these SAQs need to be extremely clear. Because if they go out and they engage with somebody who's maybe just a PCI professional, or just somebody who has past experience with PCI, that can help them get through the SAQ. But no, they're not going to be engaging with QSAs. I don't see it.
Okay, and another one from Simon. That I read as potentially a marketing plug for Human. So how are these vendors going to help a merchant demonstrate that they are susceptible, and therefore, what are they going to provide to the QSA?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because let's flip that eligibility criteria around and turn it into a test. How can you prove whether they're susceptible?
So the one way is you've totally outsourced and you're relying on the PSP's AOC. So that's the easiest.
Yeah.
The harder one is the merchant that's doing the iframe or the redirect themselves that used to meet the criteria and now they don't. They're going to have to provide 643 and 1161 proof.
Yeah.
In my book.
I think we could rename this webinar "Simon Says." I just saw another another just comment he made, but really worth saying is that the whole site matters because any script could be hijacked and make changes to the flow. Bad actors is going to hijack the flow and a step earlier. So I think that's really imperative to what we're getting back is if there's a script there, it could be hijacked. So.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I was saying that I'm not a big fan of doing a proxy between what's being served and the client-side browser because, it's almost like you're setting up everything for a man-in-the-middle attack. So basically, the proxy gets pwned, and then anybody that uses it is pwned. That's the reason that I don't like that. But going back to what Simon said, I love it. He made a point on here. He says, how are the vendors going to help a merchant demonstrate that they are susceptible, and therefore, what are they going to provide to the QSA?
Well, they're going to
Thanks,
have
Simon.
This kind of goes back to what we as QSAs with our level ones have to do at times is sit on Wireshark and with a proxy and watch how it works. And that's what happened with a client of mine last year, first time around with me. And I said, I got to see how all this stuff serves up. And so they started doing it. Okay, yeah, that's an A, that's an A. Wait a minute, what are you doing here? And lo and behold, there was a script going by. And I said, where did that script come from? Because I know where these other ones came from because you initiated a call out to the third party and the third party shipped a script. Cool. That's not a problem. But when I was looking at this other one, the script just came right on by. And I said, where was that? Oh, it's on our server. Oh, no. That's not SAQA. That's AEP. And, it was the first time anybody had actually sat on the wire with them watching how it worked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Once again, empirical data, empirical testing.
Well, we're about to close, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Now, Jeff. So it's you've probably got your script you need to follow. It's not the script. It's not the script we've been talking about.
Has somebody checked the integrity of that script?
The script.
Let's close
Yeah,
up.
so the
script kitty. Yeah.
I think I think people didn't join the call to kind of get a sales pitch. So we didn't I spared everyone those slides that talk about why Human. But certainly, right, we're one of these vendors addressing the space. We think we have the most complete tool out there to really make it as easy and simple as possible with a minimal amount of work to get up and started, as much automation as possible, fully integrated into whatever workflows in the company, because managing scripts is a team sport. You're going to need to talk to the marketing and department and to developers and be able to track progress of things. And though PCI doesn't specifically necessarily mandate it, you're going to want to block some bad behaviors. So to get back to that point before about we can't quite all go back to living in caves and just remove all of those JavaScripts from the page because the business really needs them. So one of the things that we think really differentiates our tool is the ability to continue to run those tools for their business, for all the business value that they add, while very surgically in a way that CSP definitely cannot do and most of our competitors cannot do. Very surgically just block the specific script behaviors that you might be most concerned about. For example, reading cardholder data. Just block the access to that field so the script can still run. It can do everything else good that it does there, but if it attempts to read any of those payment fields, then we'll just replace the actual value with some dummy value. And so you can be a little more confident also running them, right? Because yeah, the business demands it. I don't have a choice. I got to run it. But then as a CISO or the compliance person, yeah, I've mitigated the downside. With that, yeah, so that's probably a little more of a sales pitch than I intended to give. But I think the important thing, and thanks for all our competitors who are also in the comments commenting. I think this is sort of a community moment where the whole community is gathering to try and figure out what we do here. So if it's QSAs, vendors, merchants, service providers, I think the faster we can all align on what makes the most sense, and I think in this case, it's probably just stay the course and do 643 and 1161, either because it's a requirement or as just a way to get out of doing the much longer SAQ AEP if you want to avoid that. Then that's probably still the best choice, and it's going to be the hardest for anyone to push back and say, no, that's not enough.
Yep.
You may need to apply it to the whole site and not just the payment page.
Right.
That's the other, I guess that is the somewhat additional bad news.
I think I expect that's probably going to change.
Yeah.
And
We're
that
hoping.
might change, and
Fingers crossed.
Hopefully we get some additional helpful guidance along the way.
Toes crossed, fingers crossed, arms crossed, everything crossed.
So yeah, thanks everyone again for joining us, and thanks especially to the PCI Dream Team. Truly a dream to work with y'all. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Everybody hang around.